Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your rear brake pads and your rear brake rotor on a 2006 Mazda 3. Now first you can just pull off this little retaining spring or clip and just wedge in there with a screwdriver. Get that to pop out. And we can set that aside. Now on the side here there are these caliper slide pins, but there's a plastic cap, and if you just grab a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, you can just pry those caps out. There's the top one, and for the bottom one, same thing. Just pull those out and set those aside. Now to remove the slide pins, you'll need an Allen wrench, or in this case I've got this little Allen wrench that's set up on a like a socket. You can use it with a socket wrench, and these are 7mm, same as the front. Now these may not come all the way out, but we just have to get them, just get it loose from the caliper support bracket. There we go. The other thing you want to make sure is that the parking brake is not applied. Otherwise that will apply pressure to this caliper. I'm just wedging those pins out of the way, and now we can take the caliper off. And the brake pads just kind of fell off. Now I'm just going to kind of prop the caliper over here to the side, but you can see that we still need to compress this caliper piston back inside. A lot of times I'll just use the screwdriver method, but I thought this one had to be turned clockwise, so I'm gonna take a look at that here in a minute. Okay, so this caliper, before we push it back in, or push the caliper piston back in, it looks like there's this little coating here, like a little plate of some silicone or rust, which is covering these two holes. And that's what we're going to use when we turn that caliper back in. But that kind of threw me since it was covered, but it was just a little piece of something rusted on there. Now we need to remove these two bolts here, and that will allow us to take off this caliper support bracket. And that's a 14mm socket on there, and those are pretty tight, so I'm going to use a breaker bar on that. Knock the camera over on that first one. Let's see if we can get this one. Okay. Once you break those loose, just take out those two bolts. You can set those aside. And just hold that caliper support bracket, otherwise it will fall when you take out that second bolt. Now sometimes these rotors will pop right off. This car spent some time in Utah, so it's kind of rusted on here. But I'm just going to smack the face of this a few times with a hammer and see if we can't break that loose. That got it. Okay, then we can put the new rotor on. Now we can put our caliper bracket back on here. you're going to want to double check your manual on the torque spec here. If I get a chance, I'll look that up and put it in the description. But just make them tight for right now. Okay, now comes the fun part, winding back this caliper piston. And you know, I used to just use like a pair of needle nose or something to try to get into those holes and turn it. But I picked up this tool on Amazon. It's actually a complete kit, and it sure makes things easier. And this one's got these two little dots that, or little parts that stick out that will go into there. And then you just put that into the end of the piston, tighten this up, and you kind of just got to hold pressure with that wrench while you turn, and you can see that that actually turns that piston, threads it back inward. Now when you do this, keep in mind that you are pushing the hydraulic fluid, the brake fluid, back through the system. I showed in the other video on the front brakes here, just make sure that you take off that master cylinder and verify the level. You might need to take some of the fluid out with a paper towel or with a little turkey baster or something. But I've already done that. I'm not going to show that this time. But we'll just keep turning that in until that piston is all the way in and doesn't turn anymore. Alright, looks like we're there. Perfect. Okay, now we can put our new brake pads on, and you'll see this. The inboard pad has this little spring, and that's kind of a little retainer spring that pushes against the caliper. It keeps it down or held in place. But before I put it in, I'm going to put a little bit of this brake grease on the back. Just a dab, and then just kind of smear that around. And that will make contact here with the face of the piston. I'm going to put a little grease on there and on the boot. Kind of keeps that boot from drying out. But I also want to get some grease here on the little metal parts which hang on the caliper support bracket. Just enough around on the edges here. Anywhere it's going to make contact, the metal to metal contact. Just make sure you don't get any on the surface of the pad. And then we can set that one in place. Same thing for the outboard pad. Just another little dab or two of that brake grease, and then we'll get it all around here where it's gonna ride right here on that metal caliper bracket. This stuff really does seem to keep the brakes quiet too. And set that in place right there. Okay, now I got the pads in place and the rotor pushed in. Now before I put the caliper back on, I'm going to pop these slide pins out. They're pretty stiff, a little rough in there, and we're gonna clean those off. Just a little bit of brake cleaner on a paper towel works just fine. There's kind of like that, the material's kind of gummed up on there, and we'll clean that and then put some new grease on it. Just like the front. If you saw the video for the front pads on the same vehicle, I did the same thing. And it doesn't take much of this grease, but just enough around the base there. This is that Glyde brake grease or brake lube. Works really well. And then we can put that back in. Move it back and forth a few times just to make sure that all that grease spreads around in there. Transfers to the inside of that sleeve. And then same thing with this one. Just put that pin back in, that slide pin, and that feels a lot better than it did before. But so now I'm going to push them out so that we can put this caliper in place. Now again, here's the tricky part. You just want to make sure you get it on there. Now that little, I'll pull it back off to show you. This little spring is tricky. You got to kind of make sure that it doesn't tip one way or the other. Make sure that it stays centered. and then we can press that caliper back on and get everything lined up. So you can kind of look through here in the side. Let me show you. You can see that little spring. We just want to make sure that that stays centered and stays where it's supposed to be. But once you have those slide pins lined up, you can go ahead and tighten those down with that 7mm Allen wrench. And just double check your manual on the torque spec there, but just make them nice and snug. And don't forget to put those plastic caps back in there, top and the bottom. Now we need to put that little retaining spring back in. This brake pad kit came with a new one, so I just like to start down here at the bottom, kind of hook that around this thing at the base and push that in to get it started, and then come around over here to the top. And once those are started, if you pull on that, oops, missed it. There we go. Oh, the bottom slipped out. Well, let's try it this way. So we've got the top in. See if we can't use a screwdriver here to pry that in. All right, I'm holding it down. See if I can't persuade that. Oh, not quite. That is not easy. Well, we got it, and then the bottom popped out, so let's try that again. So the top is in now. Now the bottom is in. Nope. What a pain. I don't feel too good about that. You know, sometimes these kits that come with these springs, they're not bent exactly right, but let's see if we can get it here. Nope. All right. Well, let's compare to the old one here. It looks right. Looks very similar, at least. Looks like the old one is a little bit longer in overall length. Let me do that. Let me line up. Those two ends are lined up, and then you can tell that the old one is longer. So I think we're just gonna abandon that new one. See if we can't get this old one in there. That's way nicer. So forget that spring that came in the kit. Old one works much better, and you know, it's not rusted or anything, so we'll be good to go. So again, this is the new spring that came with it, just slightly a different size, slightly shorter than the original. So we're reusing the original. Last thing I want to do is clean this up a little bit with some brake clean. Make sure we clean up all that grease on both sides. Guess I could have done that before putting the rotor on, but that's just as well. And I'd say you're pretty much done. Just don't forget to step on the brake pedal a couple times, which will push this piston back out to make contact with the brake pads there, ensuring that your brakes will function properly. And make sure to tighten everything per spec. Just check your manual on that. If I get a chance, I'll look look up the torque specs and put them in the description, or in a link in the description to my website, with a few of the products used as well. But please subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.